Good morning and welcome back to the channel today. I appreciate you tuning in. Before we continue with 2 Kings, our morning prayer. Father, as I read and receive your word, may it deeply be rooted in me, so when difficulty comes, it will be your word that encourages and strengthens me. Amen. So as I mentioned, we're in 2 Kings. I'm going to start chapter 6 today, the floating axe head. One day the group of prophets came to Elisha and told him, "As you can see, this place where we meet with you is too small. Let's go down to the Jordan River where there are plenty of logs. There we can build a new place for us to meet." "All right," he told them, "go ahead." "Please come with us," someone suggested. "I will," he said. When they arrived at the Jordan, they began cutting down trees. But as one of them was chopping, the axe head fell into the river. "Oh, my Lord," he cried, "it was a borrowed axe." "Where did it fall?" the man of God asked. When he showed them the place, Elisha cut a stick and threw it in the water. Then the axe head rose to the surface and floated. "Grab it," Elisha said to him, and the man reached out and grabbed it. Elisha traps the Arameans. When the king of Aram was at war with Israel, he would confer with his officers and say, "We will mobilize our forces at such and such a place." But immediately Elisha, the man of God, would warn the king of Israel, "Do not go near that place, for the Arameans are planning to mobilize their troops there." So the king of Israel would send word to the place indicated by the man of God, warning the people there to be on their guard. This happened several times. The king of Aram became very upset over this. He called his officers and demanded, "Which one of you is a traitor? Who has been informing the king of Israel of my plans?" "It is none of us, my lord," one of the officers replied. "Elisha the prophet in Israel tells the king of Israel even the words you speak in the privacy of your bedroom." The king commanded, "Go and find out where Elisha is, and we will send troops to seize him." And the report came back, "Elisha is at Dothan." So one night the king of Aram sent a great army with many chariots and horses to surround the city. When the servant of the man of God got up early the next morning and went outside, there were troops, horses, and chariots everywhere. "Oh, my lord, what will we do now?" he cried out to Elisha. "Don't be afraid," Elisha told them, "for there are more on our side than on theirs." Then Elisha prayed, "O Lord, open his eyes and let him see." The Lord opened his servant's eyes, and when he looked up, he saw that the hillside around Elisha was filled with horses and chariots of fire. As the Aramean army advanced toward them, Elisha prayed, "O Lord, please make them blind." And the Lord did as Elisha asked. Then Elisha went out and told them, "You have come the wrong way. This isn't the right city. Follow me, and I will take you to the man you are looking for." And he led them to Samaria. As soon as they entered Samaria, Elisha prayed, "O Lord, now open their eyes and let them see." And the Lord did, and they discovered that they were in Samaria. When the king of Israel saw them, he shouted to Elisha, "My father, should I kill them?" "Of course not," Elisha told him. "Do we kill prisoners of war? Give them food and drink and send them home again to their master." So the king made a great feast for them and then sent them home to their king. After that, the Aramean raiders stayed away from the land of Israel. Ben-Hadad besieges Samaria. Sometime later, however, King Ben-Hadad of Aram mobilized his entire army and besieged Samaria. As a result, there was a great famine in the city. After a while, even a donkey's head sold for 2 pounds of silver, and a cup of dove's dung cost about 2 ounces of silver. One day, as the king of Israel was walking along the wall of the city, a woman called to him, "Please help me, my lord the king." "If the Lord doesn't help you, what can I do?" he retorted. "I have neither food nor wine to give you." But the king asked, "What is the matter?" She replied, "This woman proposed that we eat my son one day and her son the next. So we cooked my son and ate him. Then the next day I said, 'Kill your son so we can eat him,' and she had hidden him." When the king heard this, he tore his clothes in despair. And as the king walked along the wall, the people could see that he was wearing a sackcloth underneath next to his skin. "May God kill me if I don't execute Elisha, son of Shaphat, this very day," the king vowed. Elisha was sitting in his house at a meeting with the leaders of Israel when the king sent a messenger to summon him. But before the messenger arrived, Elisha said to the leaders, "A murderer has sent a man to kill me. When he arrives, shut the door and keep him out. His master will soon follow him." When Elisha was still saying this, the messenger arrived, and the king said, "It is the Lord who has brought this trouble on us. Why should I wait any longer for the Lord?" Chapter 7. Elisha replied, "Hear this message from the Lord. This is what the Lord says. By this time tomorrow in the markets of Samaria, 5 quarts of fine flour will cost only half an ounce of silver, and 10 quarts of barley of grain will cost only half an ounce of silver." The officer assisting the king said to the man of God, "That couldn't happen even if the Lord opened the windows of heaven." But Elisha replied, "You will see it happen, and you won't be able to eat any of it." Lepers visit the enemy camp. Now there were 4 men with leprosy sitting at the entrance of the city gates. "Why should we sit here waiting to die?" they asked each other. "We will starve if we stay here, and we will starve if we go back into the city. So we might as well go out and surrender to the Aramean army, if they let us live. So much the better, but if they kill us, we would have died anyway." So that evening they went out to the camp of the Arameans, but no one was there, for the Lord had caused the whole army of Aram to hear the clatter of the speeding chariots and the galloping of horses and sounds of great army approaching. "The king of Israel has hired the Hittites and the Egyptians to attack us," they cried out. So they panicked and fled into the night, abandoning their tents, horses, donkeys, and everything else, and they fled for their lives. When the lepers arrived at the edge of the camp, they went into one tent after another, eating, drinking wine, and carrying out silver and gold clothing and hiding it. Finally they said to each other, "This is not right. This is wonderful news, and we aren't sharing it with anyone. If we wait until morning, some terrible calamity will certainly fall upon us. Come on, let's go back and tell the people at the palace." So they went back to the city and told the gatekeepers what had happened, that they had gone out to the Aramean camp and no one was there. The horses and donkeys were tethered, and the tents were all in order. There was not a single person around. Then the gatekeeper shouted the news to the people in the palace. Israel plunders the camp. The king got out of bed in the middle of the night and told his officers, "I know what has happened. The Arameans know we are starving, so they have left their camp and have hidden in the fields. They are expecting us to leave the city, and then they will take us alive and capture the city." One of his officers replied, "We had better send out scouts to check into this. Let them take 5 of the remaining horses. If something happens to them, it won't be a greater loss than if they stay here and die with the rest of us." So 2 chariots with horses were prepared, and the king sent scouts to see what had happened to the Aramean army. They went all the way to the Jordan River, following a trail of clothing and equipment that the Arameans had thrown away in their mad rush to escape. The scouts returned and told the king about it. Then the people of Samaria rushed out and plundered the Aramean camp. So it was true that 5 quarts of fine flour were sold that day for half an ounce of silver, and 10 quarts of barley grain were sold for half an ounce of silver, just as the Lord had promised. The king appointed his officer to control the traffic at the gate, but he was knocked down and trampled to death as the people rushed out. So everything happened exactly as the man of God had predicted when the king came to his house. The man of God had said to the king, "By this time tomorrow some markets of Samaria, 5 quarts of fine flour will cost half an ounce of silver, and the quarts of barley grain will cost half an ounce of silver." The king's officer had replied, "That couldn't happen even if the Lord opened the windows of heaven." And the man of God had said, "You will see it happen, but you won't be able to eat any of it." And so it was, for the people trampled him to death at the gate. Chapter 8. The woman from Shunem returns home. Elisha had told the woman whose son he had brought back to life, "Take your family and move to some other place, for the Lord has called for a famine on Israel that will last for 7 years." So the woman did as the man of God instructed. She took her family and lived in the land of the Philistines for 7 years. After the famine had ended, she returned to the land of Israel, and she went to see the king about getting back her house and land. As she came in, the king was talking with Gehazi, the servant of the man of God. The king had just said, "Tell me some stories about the great things Elisha has done." And Gehazi was telling the king about the time Elisha had brought a boy back to life. At that very moment, the mother boy walked in to make her appeal to the king. "Look, my lord," Gehazi explained, "here is the woman now, and this is her son, the very one Elisha brought back to life." "Is this true?" the king asked her. She told him that it was. So he directed one of his officials to see that everything she had lost was restored to her, including the value of any crops that had been harvested during her absence. Jehoram rules in Judah. Jehoram, son of king of Jehoshaphat of Judah, began to rule over Judah in the 5th year of King Joram's reign in Israel. Joram was the son of Ahab. Jehoram was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 8 years. But Jehoram followed the example of the kings of Israel and was as wicked as King Ahab, for he had married one of Ahab's daughters. So Jehoram did what was evil in the Lord's sight. But the Lord was not willing to destroy Judah, for he had made a covenant with David and promised that his descendants would continue his rule forever. During Jehoram's reign, the Edomites revolted against Judah and crowned their own king. So Jehoram went with all his chariots to attack the town of Zair. The Edomites surrounded him and his charioteers, but he escaped at night under cover of darkness. Jehoram's army, however, deserted him and fled. Edom has been independent from Judah to this day. The town of Libnah revolted about that same time. The rest of the events in Jehoram's reign and all his deeds are recorded in the book of the history of the kings of Judah. When Jehoram died, he was buried with his ancestors in the city of David. Then his son Ahaziah became the next king. Ahaziah rules in Judah. Ahaziah, son of Jehoram, began to rule over Judah in the 12th year of King Joram's reign in Israel. King Joram was the son of Ahab. Ahaziah was 22 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 1 year. His mother was Athaliah, a granddaughter of King Omri of Israel. Ahaziah followed the evil example of King Ahab's family, doing what was evil in the Lord's sight, because he was related by marriage to the family of Ahab. Ahaziah joined King Joram of Israel in this war against King Hazael of Aram at Ramoth Gilead. When King Joram was wounded in battle, he returned to Jezreel to recover from his wounds. While Joram was there, King Ahaziah of Judah went to visit him. Well, thank you for joining me today. I greatly appreciate it. We'll continue 2 Kings tomorrow, beginning with chapter 9. Hope you have a great day and a blessed day. Bye.